What's up everybody? Todd here with DigginLife21. Today I am going to go over with you maintenance on this Fecon FMX36 mulching attachment that I have mounted to my Yanmar Vio 80 excavator. A lot of you guys initially watching this video are my subscribers, and most of you are more into digging, excavation, and grading, but I do encourage you to consider getting into underbrushing and forestry mulching. This forestry mulching head cost about, I think it's $20,000, and by the time you get it mounted and hoses and everything, about $22,000. While that seems like a lot of money, and it is, this head is, to me, bulletproof. I have put a lot of hours on it, and it is yet to break, is yet to let me down, is yet to get any kind of vibration. The only damage you deal with is damage to the teeth as far as regular operation. I have spooled this head up as high as it'll go and jammed it down onto trunks of trees, hardwoods, softwoods, all woods in between, and it is still perfectly balanced. Let me just spool it up so you guys can see. Now on this head, we have two main grease fittings. There's one here and there's one in here. They've got this grease fitting set in with a protective guard welded around it. Each of these two, they say to grease 4 shots of grease every 4 hours. I tend to do it between 3 and 4 hours. I don't ever let it go over, but that is extremely important. Grease is cheap, as my dad always said, but wear on your bearings and parts, expensive. There's also a grease fitting inside of here. There's a hydraulic motor in here that runs a shaft, and inside of this cover there's a pulley here and a pulley here that actually drives the drum that has the knives on it. Inside of here there's a grease fitting, and you have to grease that fitting every 40 hours. So I've got probably 20 hours since I greased that one, but I've got a big job coming up that's going to take me, actually I've got about 80 hours of work coming up. So it's the weekend, I don't really have much else going on, I'm catching up on maintenance. So I'm just going to go ahead and pull this cover and give it a couple of shots of grease to give it a boost and get it ready. This type of thing, you really can't over-grease it. There's actually a vent for this one where when you spool it up, if there's too much grease in it, it can squish it out and not, I guess, overpressure those bearings. The main thing about this video that I want to drive home is, when do you need to change your knives out? Some people call these knives, some call them teeth. I call it both. For this video, we'll call them knives. I'll probably screw up and say teeth too, so. Never, ever, ever work on this head with that machine running. If one of these, for some reason, and definitely don't ever, I try not to even get out of the machine as much as possible when this drum is spinning. If I do, I never walk within about these angles of those teeth, because I've had one come off of a Fecon bull hog that was on a skid steer, and it is frightening how fast that tooth came off and went shooting through the woods. I couldn't really see the tooth itself, but I saw all the debris in front of me split when that thing went through it. So be extremely careful around these. Don't screw around with it, and just for all practical purposes, don't get around this end when that drum is spinning, even if it's just spinning a little bit. I knew of a guy who had one of these down on the ground, and actually it's a story that was told to me, and he stepped on this and wanted to spin it with his foot. Well, when he spun it, his foot went down to the ground and this tooth punctured the top of his boot. So when these are new, they're razor sharp. I'll show you in a minute. But what I'm going to drive home is, when do these knives actually need to be changed? When I first started forestry mulching, I thought these teeth and knives had to be razor sharp, and that's just not the case. These you look at as individual little axes. If you've ever split wood with an axe, it doesn't matter how sharp the axe is, it's more how much momentum you hit the block of wood with. Sharp axe does help, but it's your momentum. And with this head spooled all the way up, spinning thousands and thousands of RPMs a minute, when that makes contact with wood, it's going to split it. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you guys a brand new tooth here. And for my subscribers who help me make my videos better, I'm shooting in 4K today, and I'm going to upload in 4K. So tell me if you can tell if the video quality is better or if it's worth the extra upload time. This is a brand new tooth. Brand new, both sides. And I'm telling you, it is razor sharp. Absolutely razor sharp. Now, let me pull one of these teeth that needs to be changed and show you the difference. Actually, what'll be even better is, see, like that tooth doesn't look that bad. And I was cutting yesterday. I may try to put a link to that video to show you guys how well this was cutting. But you can see these teeth, it's this running edge. You don't want a bunch of rock chips and big chunks out of it. This is actually a good cutting tooth. Let's see if we can find one. Right there's one that you can see. It's blunt. And typically, your teeth from in here are going to be in the worst shape. Typically, this outside one for me is not in that bad a shape. Now again, these do not have to be razor sharp. These drums don't like to spin backwards. They'll free spin this way. So as you can see, these knives are not in too bad of shape. See, now that one's getting really blunt. That side's not too bad. This side is. So we're gonna have to change this whole tooth out. And actually this one hasn't been flipped yet. Each tooth has 2 cutters, and you can just take these teeth off and flip them. So each tooth costs $40 to me. So in figuring on jobs and wear, each side of this tooth is worth $20. To change these teeth out, you just need a 3/4 socket or impact and loosen these. There is a bolt that goes in here, and there's a nut and washer. It's a lock washer. And that's all that holds these on. I'm gonna go through how I pull these off. A lot of people wonder why I use a socket instead of an impact wrench. This thing never runs out of battery, and it will not let you down when you're out in the field. Plus, you can just throw this little bitty wrench in the floorboard of the machine and an extra tooth, and you're good to go for the whole day, for the most part. So I'll just take these, put them on there, give it a couple of taps. Wear gloves and be careful not to slip, because if this was a new tooth and you slip, glove or not, that sucker's probably going to go to the bone. Just like anything else. You got your nut in there. Just give that bolt a couple of taps. That'll slide out. And here's your little bitty washer. Change those out every couple of times. Now this tooth has got a fit right here, and I mean it's fit tight. So to get it off, you don't have to slam this thing, but I'll hold the tooth one way or the other, and I'll just kind of pull pressure on it. So I can do it where y'all can see. First time you do these, it can be aggravating, but just kind of hit it at a downward angle and just tap it. Don't hit your hand, that hurts. Just tap, 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 and that tooth will come right off. Now, one thing you do want to check, let me just spin this all the way around instead of trying to back spin it. This actually will come out. But what you want to do is clean the bed of this knife holder really good. So when you put the new tooth on or flip this tooth, which you can see, this tooth is brand new on this side. So here's where it was at. You just flip it. Make sure the bed is clean, because if it's not and it's got debris in there and you put this on, those first few times hitting into wood will compress that material that's stuck in there, and it'll cause this tooth to loosen up, and that is no good. So you just clean all this. This thing right here is going to be clean. I've never had it get dirt in there, but just check it anyway. You can put some lubricant in there just to make this easier, but usually you can just take that tooth and just kind of wiggle it right on. Okay, hold him in place, take your bolt, and it actually will fit right in there. Okay, getting seated, spinning down. You want to make sure this area is clean too. Take your washer, put it back on. Don't drop it on the ground like I just did. Put it right there. My nut got stuck up in there. Now, me personally, I like to turn the nut the same way every time. It's probably just a little bit of OCD is all that is. I'm trying not to shadow what I'm doing here. Just put that nut on there. It's been a while since I had to change these around, so a little bit of rust will make a difference. Changing these things out in the field is super easy. There's nothing to it. And just kind of wiggle this into place as you pull it. And what I'll do is pull that just with your weight. And then, just to give it a little something extra, I'll pull this straight out and I'll give it about an extra 1/8 to 1/4 turn. Like that. That's all there is to changing those teeth out. How picky you are about how sharp you keep your knives is kind of a personal preference. If you're doing a lot of roadside mowing and you're cutting grasses, these are going to need to be fairly razor sharp. If you're going to be doing a lot of right-of-way or roadside subdivision mowing maintenance, and it's a bunch of stuff that really is 1 inch or less, I would not recommend one of these heads. I would get a rotary head that's just like a bush hog, and it usually has a blade carrier, and it spins, and it's got between 2 and 3 blades most of the time. And as opposed to spinning like this, they spin like that. And also, this is just a 36-inch opening. The one we just ordered, the Brushmaster, has a 60-inch cut. Time is money when it comes to running these machines. This excavator doesn't care if it's got this head or the Brushmaster rotary head on it. It doesn't care. It runs the same. It pumps the same hydraulic fluid out, and it will affect fuel a little bit as to how hard it's pushing hydraulic fluid, but your production is going to be just hugely different. Now, you get into a situation where there's a lot of traffic around and you don't want stuff just getting slung in different directions. This is a good unit. You can feed material straight in the back. Almost always come out right here, and it'll usually come out at this angle. Almost always. I shouldn't say always, but almost always. This is a very reliable head. You can control material. With a rotary head, it tends to just kind of sling stuff out if it doesn't have guards. So at this point, we've gone over how to maintenance this head, doing kind of a preventative inspection on all of this. Your hoses, check your sleeves, make sure that they're in place on these sharp edges. This rubber material here keeps this hose from getting rubbed on the thumb and in here. This is not a bad enough something to stop it from operating, but there is a cut right here, and that's something I'm going to keep an eye on. You've got some chewing at the outer cover of this hose. You want to check all your fittings. If you start getting seepage, just change them out. I ran this head for 5 hours straight yesterday. I haven't changed anything out, and you can see it's completely dry. I can't stand leaks, and if there's leaks, there's something wrong. So keep a check on the head. You'll notice my head perfectly dry, no oil on it. The only time it gets oil on it is when I take my case drain loose. The case drain on this is this smaller line, and it's a back feed to the tank hydraulic tank on the machine. That way, if this unit becomes over pressurized or you hit something hard and it over pressurizes the motor, it can push that additional fluid out here just back to the tank where it won't do any harm. One major design flaw that Fecon does need to fix. So Fecon, if you're listening, this needs to be addressed. This cover is not very thick. I think it's 3/16 steel. The rest of this head is super strong. 3/8 plate metal. Everything is tough, but inevitably you're going to bump against a tree. And this right here, you can see it's gotten beat up. You know, these bolts, I have to straighten it once in a while, and it's so thin that I can take adjustable pliers, hook on here, and just bend it back straight. So that, I think, is a bad design. They need to make this heavier. But all of this, I mean, listen, that don't even do nothing. All of this, it's solid. Why they made this so weak, I don't know. It would not cost them that much more to make this out a 1/4 inch. So Fecon, if you don't mind, fix it. Now I'm going to run through each of these teeth that does need to be changed. And for those of you who do want to stick around, it's worth going through it with me, because every time you change one of these or flip it, it's 20 bucks. And if you unnecessarily change these, you're just throwing $20 bills out the window. And even though you can charge, in my area, anywhere from, for this head and this machine, $1,500 to $2,200 a day. That's 8 hours of operation. If you take care of these, they will last you and last you and last you. You're not going to be constantly changing these things. So I'm going to hold up the new tooth, and I'm going to hold up the tooth I'm changing, and you'll be able to see the difference, and I'll tell you exactly why I'm changing it or rotating it. Alrighty, so you can see, number one, these are supposed to be kind of a little bit U-shaped, and that helps it grab material. This one's starting to get flattened out. This side is just pretty well destroyed. This leading tip is not sharp. This one's already been flipped. You can see abrasions. Now, one thing I'm looking at here is, can I save this tooth? This tooth is pretty well beyond its useful life, but if all 4 sides, or even 2 of one side of this knife was even like this, I could take a grinder and sharpen it. So you can sharpen these knives. Don't just throw them away, but if you get a whole lot of area like this, it's no good. But keep these and collect them. They're heavy. These things are heavy, and you can take them to a scrap yard along with any other metal that you have and scrap them, and you can make a little bit of money back on them. So even when they're just destroyed, they're worth something to you. So again, let's just spin him on around. If you hear something go clink, it's this little thing that fell out on the ground. You want to make sure it's clean. It is. Take your tooth, pop him on there. Alright guys, so this tooth is being flipped. It's not in horrible shape, but it is definitely dull, and with doing a subdivision job coming up, it probably would not cut the grasses very good. But let me just show you all that junk that got under the bed. This tooth is not going to work at all. So this one's going in the recycling. You can see how bad this is, the difference. All right, just for those of you who are curious, the bull hog that goes on like a Terex 210 skid steer, okay, this is the tooth that goes on this carrier, the bull hog tooth. Now, as far as the cutters or cutting area is the same, but that's a lot bigger tooth. And I think these are a pretty good bit more. I think they're 80 bucks per tooth. So same cutting area, but these and that bull hog head puts out a lot more force, and you talk about some production. If you're on flat ground, definitely consider a bull hog and a skid steer Now also, if you're working in wet areas, go with an excavator. You can get yourself out of a wet bog with this thing. You pull a skid steer into a wet bog and you're going to be getting one of these to pull it out. Now here again, this was the side that's on the bottom, and you can see there's a whole lot of sawdust. It's compacted there. You know, if you're flipping this tooth, it doesn't make a difference, but the side that's going to go down and against the bed, you need to have that clean. So you can see this tooth here. I'm gonna get out of the shadow. It's really not that bad. This side is okay, but this side with that little indentation there, that, now that it's blunt, every time it hits something, it's going to get blunt a lot faster and dull a lot faster. So we're going to go ahead and flip this one too. See right here, guys, don't get complacent when you're changing these out if it just keeps on being clean, because this big old chunk of wood chips, especially when it's wet, they'll accumulate worse. That could have potentially been disastrous in keeping this tooth from being able to seat properly. And then you've got a tooth flying out through the woods, or potentially a neighborhood if you're doing roadside mowing in a subdivision. And if you hit somebody with one of these, if it hit them in their, you know, body or head, I can assure you it would kill them, and you would be liable. So keep that in mind. A brand new tooth for this carrier. Some people call it a holder. And check the nut too around the edges, because you need it to seat as well. So call it a holder, knife holder, carrier, whatever you want to call it. It has to seat. And the way it's shaped, as you tighten down on it, it tightens the tooth from being able to wiggle. You've got to have those solid. That is extremely important. Alright friends, so we've changed out every tooth that I feel like was in complete disrepair. So even that one's kind of rounded, but I think I can grind it and save it. So in total, I thought I removed more than this, but 4 teeth. And I'm just going to go through them and let you kind of see them from all angles. That's one. You see that one's just chipped off badly. I may even this winter, a couple of these, be able to grind and take the time on to really do some good on them, but I'm not going to invest a lot time-wise, because it's you know, when you're charging $150 to $200 per hour, you could be on site making that much as opposed to saving a $40 tooth that takes you 20 to 30 minutes to get it just right. So, you know, you got to figure those gambles in. That's 3. And then this one is not in terrible shape, but I feel like they're just not worth it. But now this winter, if we have a big slowdown, and I've got a week where I'm just twiddling my thumbs and drinking coffee, why not take that time and really work these teeth over? The ones that are in total disrepair and just destroyed, more or less, they'll just go to the scrapyard. But I've got a whole box in here. Check it out. These are my drops. Just leftover teeth. You can see I've got a bunch of time worth. Look at the difference in this one. See that tooth? Look how much I ground that side down. This is back when I was trying to save them as much as possible. Look at the difference in that. Okay, so I got a whole box of teeth that potentially I could run through and sharpen, but while I'm busy and I have a lot of work, the trade-off for how much I'll save by sharpening it, the time it's going to take to repair these teeth, as opposed to being out in the field working, it's just it doesn't make sense. All right, so now I'm going to do a super fast time lapse showing you guys how I sharpen these teeth, and you can see kindly as it progresses how I sharpen the tooth and how it gets sharper. Ideally, on this flat surface here, you want to grind it the whole way back to here from the front. You want to grind it flat down into the tooth. If you just grind this front edge, eventually that edge is going to be farther away from the wood than this part that doesn't even cut. So you got to grind it flush, and I'll also take the grinding wheel and grind in here just a touch, not a lot.